Hey everybody, it is Sunday afternoon around 2 p.m. Central. Welcome to the Sunday show here on the line. Ooh, I was hearing something extra. Anyway, I'm Matt Dillahunty, joined this week, Austin Archer. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you over there? There's so much going on in the country right now. I regret that I'm kind of woefully underinformed on the situation in Texas. I know that it's a bad situation, but how are you doing over there in Texas?
Yeah, I'm woefully underinformed on a handful of things because with everything going on, I alternate between focusing intently on the news in preparation to, have discussions and other things like that, and then avoiding the news. Unfortunately, I spent part of this weekend, basically, I'm back after 20 years to playing EverQuest, but we spent the weekend just grinding out alternate advancement points. But my alarm on my phone, or the warning on my phone, kept going off 5 times. Severe flooding, flash flooding. It was pouring rain here, and it became clear very quickly that this was going to be a big deal. The short details are that around the Kerrville area outside of Austin, they got months worth of rain in mere hours, and waters surged 26 feet in 45 minutes. So Texas is not equipped. Well, there's a reason we don't have basements in Texas, mainly because there's just a rock layer, and a number of other problems. But 26 feet in 45 minutes.
I don't know if there are any places that are equipped to handle 26 feet in 45 minutes.
I wouldn't imagine there are. The death toll is currently nearing 70, including 21 children from a summer camp that was on the banks of a river in Kerrville, because that's where you have summer camps. And so they have sent out rescue teams, helicopters, boats, drones, all of it. And the question now, and this will continue for a while, and I don't know the answer, were the warnings sufficient, and were they as good as they could have been? Now, I have no idea. There's been no time to investigate this. I know people are talking, complaining and protesting and talking lawsuits and investigations and everything else. I have no idea if they gave the best warnings they could in the timeliest fashion. But since our government is focused more on kidnapping day workers, further marginalizing and victimizing trans folks, removing Medicaid and healthcare access, and as Texas has an incredibly bad track record with weather-related infrastructure, like our notorious problems with our power grid, I'm not confident that the staff, technology, or processes were sufficient to give the best warning possible. I hope it was. My heart goes out to the families who've lost loved ones in this. I hope they find peace through their grief, but I hope they join everybody in continuing to push your elected representatives to do the best job possible, including preventative measures, and stop wasting time focusing on whether or not we're going to burn a flag or ban a book, or whether or not who pees in what fucking bathroom. It's just embarrassing that as the world crumbles, we have leaders who are making millions, if not billions, while shitting on the poor. And I think the White House just kind of shrugged at the flooding that was happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I think your response is right to say, I don't know whether the warnings were sufficient or whether they were delivered in a timely manner. I lived earlier this year through the LA wildfires that ravaged Los Angeles. And it was sort of a similar thing where we were just inundated with alerts for like a 72-hour period. It was like every 15 minutes there was a new alert that there was a new fire. And my girlfriend and I and our friends were kind of running all over the San Fernando Valley trying to get away from wherever the new fire was and trying to keep an eye on that. And it was kind of hard to watch the national conversation and everyone giving their hot takes on whether they thought the response teams were doing enough or whether they, the conspiracy theories that were coming out of, was this a coordinated thing? And I would just caution anyone who's listening to be careful about the opinions that you do offer up when something like this happens before you have sufficient information. I think it's a good thing that you lead off with, I don't know whether or not there was sufficient warning given, but I think you're absolutely right to say what we do know is that our federal government seems much more focused on all of the wrong areas and all of the wrong things than anything that actually matters. What we do know is that the National Weather Service had their budget gutted by the current administration. So what we do have some information on the table to know that it would seem like sufficient attention is not being paid to areas where it actually needs to be paid to, and what we're spending our time, money, and energy on right now is combating the rise of fascism in the country instead of confronting the reality of climate change and climate change related disasters and just taking care of people.
Right. I mean, in the same way, it could be that everything was done right, that the best possible warnings were given in sufficient time, and that this freakish flooding, like the freakish blizzard that we had a few years ago, isn't tied in any way to climate change, man-made or otherwise. The thing is, not only do we not know, I don't know how we go about finding out now, because like I remember dealing with conspiracy theorists after 9/11. And when you pushed back enough on what they were actually claiming until they got to a point where they couldn't, offer an actual defense, they would just go to, well, I don't believe the official government story. And I get it. There's good reason to be dubious of things coming from the government, but also the government's huge. And to suggest that everybody who has access to this information is similarly ethically compromised while they are in disagreement with other people, it's like if somebody knew, we would know by now. It's one of the things. It's one of the reasons I'm confident there's not the kind of massive nonsensical conspiracies people advocate for, because the number of people you would have to keep quiet about it and the way you would have to try to work extra hard to hide the evidence. You can't just go, oh, they're false flag actors. You end up getting sued like Alex Jones did, because some people can demonstrate that. And so I just wanted
the
to
moon
say,
landing. It's like the moon landing. It's like how the amount of scientists who worked tirelessly to be able to work for NASA, and then they would have to, after that process, going through that process to qualify to work for an organization like that, they go, hey, guess what? We're going to need you to be tight-lipped about this lie that we're telling everybody. And nobody's going to say,
some kid waited his whole life to join NASA to fly to the moon and then finds out, hey, we're actually not going to the moon. We're just going to film it on a sound stage. What the fuck did I train for? What did I dedicate my life to? To suggest that everybody's just going to go along with all of that. I mean, the complexities of conspiracy theories are ridiculous. Despite that, there are conspiracies that happen. There is corruption, and all we can do is hope that we work to do our best to expose that. For now, everything could have just been freakishly weird with this flooding, and 26 feet of surging in 45 minutes. Maybe it's one of those things where, as they're processing the numbers, they're like, something's got to be wrong. There's no way we could actually expect that much rainfall, several months worth of rain in several hours. And it could also be the case that they didn't want to bring about panic, but it seems like we could have maybe gotten those kids out of that summer camp and back home if we'd have known better. And maybe we did not know enough in time.
Yeah, could be. But yeah, I think what is clear is that our federal government, right, our this current administration and the Republican Party seems focused on all the wrong things at a time when there's actual lives at stake, when there's actual, you know, real work they could be doing. We got people like the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, saying things like, America is the first nation in the history of the world to acknowledge that our rights come from God and not from the government. That's America's the first nation to ever acknowledge that. Did you know that, Matt?
I
What an
did not know
amazing
that.
yeah, he said that. I'm not sure if I'm directly quoting him there, but I'm pretty sure I'm close to the wording there that he said we are the first nation to recognize that our rights come from God and not from the government, which is kind of actually the opposite of the way that the country was intended to be structured. We were intended to be one of the first nations ever to say that our rights do come from us, that it's for the people by the people. Yeah.
It's wild
Of the
because
people.
what Mike Johnson doesn't seem to know or honestly acknowledge is that, yes, the Declaration of Independence, us declaring our independence from England, begins by saying we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, or in the case of Declaration, they said unalienable rights, but we've changed language a little bit. And however, that specific language isn't identifying a God or a specific God. And the Declaration of Independence is not a legal governing document of the United States at all. What is a legal governing document, or the legal governing document, is the Constitution of the United States, which has no mention of God at all. And the closest it comes is in Article 4 or 6, I forget which one. It states that there will be no religious test for any public office or trust. Apart from that, we were the first nation specifically to enshrine in our Constitution secular principles, the notion that this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, that saying you ought to have rights is completely independent from saying you do have rights and these rights will be protected. And it's the Constitution that serves as the foundation to protect those rights. And it's the Constitution that Trump, MAGA, Project 2025, and the Christian nationalists are desperately trying to erode. And so when Mike Johnson comes out and says something like this, he's engaged in dishonest propaganda in order to undermine the very Constitution of the United States. It makes him, in my book, along with many of the others, an absolute traitor, an enemy to the Constitution, because it's very clear what they're trying to do. And maybe he's just misinformed. But if you're the Speaker of the House and you're still this misinformed, you should still be removed from your position, because there's no excuse for being in charge of a portion of the government and saying things that are the exact opposite of reality, when we all know that the reality.
Yeah. Separation of church and state. Right there. Yep. We put it in that legal governing document. It's crazy to suggest otherwise. It's also, even if he were correct that we had in our Constitution that our rights come from God and not from the government, even if that were in there, it's not, but even if it were, to say that we're the first nation ever in the history of the world to is even crazier.
It sounds like something Trump would say. We're the best, we're the biggest, we were the first to do this. It's amazing. You know, it's bombastic. And it's like they're all just, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's saying exactly what Trump wanted him to say. That wouldn't surprise me at all, because it's very clear people are getting their marching orders and their, propaganda right down to social media posters and trolls and all that stuff. Anyway, so this is a call-in show designed to allow people to call in and explain for theism what they believe, why they believe it, and in particular, why they think we should, or anybody should, believe as well. If you're a theist who wants to call in and defend that, we already have several theists on hold. We'll be getting to them in just a moment. The number is on the screen, and down below is a way for you to call in. There'll be a link in the description. So the number is 720-619-2288, and then there's a link in the description how you can call with a web call. Let me save you guys some time. Austin and I genuinely want to have the conversations. We would love to know why we should believe. Not that we expect that you're likely to convince us, but we are open to being convinced. If you have a good argument, I'll believe anything with a good enough argument. I would even undermine the foundations of logic to show that identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle aren't in fact reliable if somebody could make the case for that without also relying on those foundational logical principles. If you're calling in to talk about how God is love or God is everything, or if you have a completely untestable God, if you have a God that is yours and yours alone, if you think you've detected the undetectable, that I'd like to talk about. But if you're just calling in to say that God is, immune to detection or whatever else, I don't want to know that unless you're a theist who has a defense for belief outside of that, because maybe you have, divine revelation or something else. I don't need the sort of bong rip theology stuff of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, or let's have a discussion about what is reality. There are billions of people on the planet who believe in some sort of God that is assigned to or part of some sort of religion or religious package. It may not necessarily be a structured, organized church. It could be a looser structure of people who are saying, oh, we're just this group. We don't have a church or a building. We don't need a church or a building. We have all of that's fine. Because if those people are acting in accordance with their beliefs, then their beliefs are going to dictate who they're going to vote for, how they're going to view rights, how they're going to view privileges, what are they going to think about people who are different from them, and what rights are they going to afford those. So that stuff matters. I investigated higher energy stuff, and I'm convinced that God is everything and everyone. He's not hiding under the bed. He is under the bed, on top of the bed, in the bed, everywhere. If you don't have a way to demonstrate that it's true, it would just be a waste of time for us to try to engage on it. It's not that we're saying you're wrong. I don't know how to address it.
It makes me think of like Jordan Peterson recently did one of those Jubilee surrounded videos on YouTube, and it was the original title of the video was supposed to be Theist Debates 20 Atheists. But since Jordan Peterson refused to commit at any point in the video to a concrete definition of what of the term God, or how he conceives of that word, or what, they couldn't call it that, so they just changed the title to Jordan Peterson Debates 20 Atheists, and the video makes no sense because nobody knows what they're there to debate, because he won't commit to a firm position on whether or not he is a believer in an anthropomorphic God or any specific kind of deity. He can't, because he knows a lot of his audience and a lot of the people who follow him are believers, but he kind of believes in more of like this sort of literary tradition of God, this sort of passed down mythos of the story of God, but he won't actually just commit in the conversation to what specifically it is that he is arguing for, and that makes the entire conversation pointless. So that's sort of what we're looking for, is if you call in, we'd like to know that you have a somewhat concrete idea of what it is that you are trying to convince us of, so that we can actually have a productive conversation.
And the last note before we get to callers, because we've got callers queued up for days and we're so excited about this. I am remaining in Zen mode. Yes, of course, I blew my Zen on Wednesday and I think it was entirely justified, but I'm still working on being better about stuff. And so while I'm going to queue up the calls, Austin is going to be the bad guy today. And he's going to do it while not changing anything about who he is at all. I'm just going to be better, and we'll see how it goes.
I'm just naturally bad, is what you're saying.
All right, let's see how we're doing this. We have our first caller calling. Erica, pronounced they them, from California, says they're going to explain why there's no physical proof of God. How you doing, Erica?
Doing great.
Sweet. Which God do you think there's not physical proof of, and why?
The God that would be credited for creation.
Which one is that?
Okay.
The one that I believe created everything.
Okay.
Okay. So
that's firm enough. You believe that there is an anthropomorphic entity that created the universe.
I don't know what that means, but
anthropomorphic means.
Do you think that the creator God that you believe in is a thinking agent with will and purpose?
I don't know if they're a thinking agent, but do they have will and purpose? Yeah, they have will and purpose.
How do you have will and purpose without being a thinking agent?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. It's not really what I called in to talk about, though.
Okay. Well, we're trying to set the framework here so we can discuss this, because it says you're going to explain why there's no physical proof of God. Why is that?
Okay, the reason there's no physical proof of God, because if there was physical proof of God, people would try to harness whatever substance that would be and try to be God themselves.
Okay. I'm going to let you go, Erica. Not only, I don't see any value in continuing this conversation, because you're saying there isn't proof, because if there were proof, people would try to become gods. That is just an absolutely pointless, ad hoc excuse. And I will ask you one last question. If there's no physical proof for God, what is your reason for believing in God?
Faith.
You there, Erica?
I said faith.
Oh, faith.
Faith. Oh,
just
I'm sorry.
Just because.
We couldn't hear that. Okay.
So the answer is just because?
I don't believe faith is defined as just because.
What is faith as defined to you?
Whatever you would look up in the dictionary and find the word faith to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for your insight.
I have no interest. I have no interest in your avoidance of issues and the fact that you are confused and don't understand even the basics. I'm not going to pull up a dictionary to find out whether or not you agree with it. Is there any position, any possible position that someone could not accept and just say they accept it on faith? Like, would it be acceptable for someone to say, I'm the smartest, prettiest person in the world, and I take that on faith?
Well, I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking about faith in God.
You did get one thing completely right. You're not talking about anything else. Goodbye. All right.
Good closing line. So that was actually a really good example of the rules we tried to set. It's clear that Erica probably wasn't listening to what Matt said right before we started the calls, which was we want to be able to set the parameters of what specifically are we talking about. And what we were asking Erica, just this is for the other theists that are on hold right now, because we do have other theists waiting in the queue. And what we were asking is, can you just define for us what your specific notion of God is, so we can know what it is you're advocating for, what it is you're trying to convince us of? And if it's this amorphous thing where it's like, I can't say if it's a thinking agent, I don't know what anthropomorphic means, I don't know if it's a being or not, I don't know if it's just an energy or a force or, like, then that's exactly what Matt was talking about. That's a bong rip philosophy dorm room. God could be anything, man. Like, what if God and it's like, cool. That's not really what this show exists for. This show exists for people who have a specific idea of a specific deity to call in and explain to us why we should adopt their specific idea of what God is. And so that's what we're looking for.
Let's give it a try. I'm gonna cue this one up and introduce him, and then so Gohan is or Han, I don't know which one it is calling from Texas. No preferred pronouns. They're a theist that wants to talk about heaven and hell and acceptance into heaven. Austin, what do you think about when somebody wants to just talk about heaven and hell?
I'm writing a sketch right now about hell. I think that the concept of hell is one of the biggest plot holes in the theistic narrative, and the concept of the devil. It's one of the strangest things in my mind that I can figure this plot hole out, but the devil can't. If the devil is this like supernatural being that like all the devil has to do to mess with God's plan and most of the conceptions of God that involve a devil and that involve hell, all the devil has to do is just refuse to participate. Just say, oh, I'm not going to, like, if your plan requires a villain, I just won't do it. And then I therefore foil your plan. And at that point, God is left with no option other than to force the devil to participate, in which case the devil is not actually doing it. He is doing it under duress or under the control of God, or God has to play both parts. But the fact that I can figure that out and the devil can't figure that out, and the devil has like supernatural powers and the ability to influence, is ostensibly a much smarter being than me should be. It has been around for a lot longer than I've been around, has existed for millennia. I think that's one of the biggest plot holes. So I would be interested, Gohan or Gohan, in hearing what you have to say about heaven and hell.
I'm wondering if maybe Gohan has a completely non-Christian view of things, and it doesn't fit the mold you're talking about. So Gohan, welcome to the show. What is it you'd like to tell us about heaven and hell?
Thank you. So that's kind of a really good segue into what I want to talk about. The reason why I want to talk about this is because I keep hearing from hosts throughout various call-in shows, like a big problem is even if they were convinced that God is real, they wouldn't worship him because he's morally evil. One thing I keep hearing is like, how can you send somebody to hell for an infinite time for a finite crime? Is that kind of the position you guys hold?
Sure. I think it's immoral too.
I'm confused real quick because you're calling in because you want to discuss this because you hear certain things. All I need you to do is to tell me what you think heaven and hell is and why we should agree with you.
Sure. So I'm about to get into it. So for heaven and hell, I don't view anybody is ever sent. This is what I've been taught as a Catholic Christian, that nobody is sent to heaven or hell. Hell is chosen. The gates from hell are locked from the inside, not the outside. It's a choice somebody makes based off of primarily what heaven is.
Okay.
How does a person choose hell?
The choice is not hell. The choice is either God or not God. I've heard from many people, even if God is real, they would
go on.
Be with God.
Go on. I don't have a choice of whether to be with God or not God if I'm not presented with evidence that there is a choice or that there is a right or wrong choice. If instead, by my mere disbelief, I am sent to a terrible afterlife, who sends me to that afterlife?
I don't agree with that statement.
It's a question. Gohan, it's a question. If through my disbelief, I am sent to a hell, who sends me there?
I would say nobody.
Okay, so nobody enforces the rules. It just happens?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But that's not
how do you know that? How do you know that these are rules that just happen independent of anyone taking an action?
This is independent on what is known. This is dependent on what is a Christian belief. This is a Christian belief. This is what you guys disagree with.
Gohan. I was a Christian for many, many years, was studying to be a preacher. I'm aware of the different versions of Christian things. I'm not interested in anyone calling in to merely tell us what Christian beliefs are. They need to offer a reason for why we should agree that that is true. Is that clear?
That's very clear. This is not a question.
So can you demonstrate that what you believe about heaven and hell is true?
I feel like I can, but that was not the point of this call.
That's the only
point of this show.
Gohan, that is the only point of this call, and the only reason you are talking to us right now is to defend your beliefs. If you're not interested in doing that, I'll go on to a caller who is. There are people on hold that are waiting to defend their beliefs, not just call in and say, here's what I believe, because then we'd just be like, well, that's just your opinion, bro. Thanks.
Well, that's fair. I do love to defend my belief. I will if
Then
that's the ultimate
then you need
point.
to do it. Then you need
That's
to do
the
it,
point
and
of
you
the
need to do
show.
it now.
That's why this show
I
exists.
understand that.
Go on.
You guys have theological qualms all the time, so this was to address that. I'm going to switch subjects
What are
now.
theological qualms?
No, you're
that
not
we
going to
have?
switch subjects. You're not going to switch subjects at all, Gohan. You are either going to defend your belief in heaven and hell, or I will hang up on you and go on to someone who's honest.
So to defend my belief on heaven and hell, I have to defend my belief in God first. Is that correct?
No, I don't know. So here's the thing. I don't.
Okay.
See, you are calling in. Don't say a word. I'm explaining this to you. Hopefully you'll get it. You are calling in because you heard things that don't agree with you, and you're calling in to offer a different perspective, as if we haven't heard your particular perspective, I don't know, 1,000 times. But I don't know what your reasons are. So when I say it's up to you to present your defense of why your beliefs about heaven and hell are accurate, I don't get to say you need to prove God first until after you make your case. And then we say, oh, is that conditioned on God existing? Is that conditioned on this? You just a minute ago said that God isn't relevant to what goes to heaven or hell. It just happens automatically. So you don't get to say, oh, do I have to prove this first, until after you explain why we should believe it in the first place. If you're just going to say you should believe it because this is what I understand the Bible to say, then you're going to have to give an explanation for why you're correct about the Bible and why we should agree. If you're going to say I believe it because this is what I'm convinced God believes, then you're going to have to defend that. I don't get to preempt it until you've presented your case, which you seem incredibly reluctant to do. I can't tell you what steps you've skipped past. Is that clear?
I think that's a little bit more clear. So what you wanted me to defend is not my belief in God, but my belief on why I think that heaven or hell is based off of free choices.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm on
I don't
board.
even know. So I'd be interested in how you know that heaven and hell are even real in the first place. But
well,
that'll
yeah, if I get
up.
into that, I have to go into my evidence for God. And I don't think you want me to go down that route. I think you want me to be more specific about my evidence for why I believe judgment is more based on free will other than what you've done in the past.
Well, no. See, if you don't have evidence to show that judgment is based on free will and that it happens without any intervention from a God, well, go ahead. Why should we believe that judgment is merely based on free will?
Okay, so God is trying, the whole idea of heaven is to be with God or not. The idea is not to get into a place of eternal bliss. It's to be in a place with God. And
I
not
didn't
just
ask
a place
about
with
that,
God,
Gohan. While I'm not claiming expertise on anything, I know a lot about this. I've lectured on this subject many, many times, was studying to be a preacher. There's a number of different takes. I need you to present the evidence for why your take on heaven and hell is correct.
I'm sorry, do you want me to go through evidence through the Bible, or how do you want me to get to this evidence?
The Bible isn't evidence. The Bible is the claim. If you're just going to use the Bible as the reason you believe, then you would have to justify the Bible.
Yes, agreed. So that's why I was saying, do you want me to justify my belief in God and the Bible, or do you want me to justify my belief?
I no longer want anything from you. I'm going to leave it for Austin to figure out what he wants, because I don't want a thing. This is entirely, see, this is a ridiculous amount of work to do. 9 minutes and 20 seconds, and we shut up. 9 minutes and 20 seconds, and we still haven't got you to explain, even in the slightest, why we should agree with your take on heaven and hell. And I'm out of useful questions to ask you because I find you obstinate and non-responsive. So I'm going to see if Austin can do better, because it's probably my fault.
Yeah, we'll see. No worries either way.
Where do you think you would need to start, Gohan, to explain to us the evidence for your belief in heaven and hell? Where do you think you would need to start?
If I'm being 100% honest, where I need to start is evidence for God, and then I can build up for evidence for the Bible. If I could just draw a quick roadmap. Evidence for God, then evidence for the Bible, and then evidence for theology, which this is a question of theology.
Okay.
So you would rather evidence for God?
You could do it exactly what you just said. Exactly what you just said. If that's the formula.
Okay. Do you mind if I work backwards?
Whatever you think is going to help you make your case the best.
So I would say that God wants to be with us. That was the whole point of creation. The only way he's going to be with us forever is in heaven. We have a free choice on if we want to be with him or not. If we choose not to be with him, we're not with him. We go to hell. All of this, I feel like, is based on readings from the Bible and early church fathers. And I take most of that evidence based on historical evidence. And then I take my belief in God based on an acronym I came up with called SHAPE: Science, History, Arguments for Morality and Reason, and then Personal Experience.
Great, amazing. So what is the, so you mentioned historical evidence for the Bible. You said you take your so you explained your theology and your theological interpretation of biblical, theism. Then you said you take your evidence for the Bible based on history. What evidence in history do you have that substantiates the claims in the Bible?
Okay, just a couple of claims in the Bible that are substantiated in history. I've been watching a lot of apologias videos, and as well as Gary Habermas and Mike Latona. Even Bart Ehrman, there's a lot of evidence that Jesus was man, crucified, died, tomb was found empty. His followers stopped following him for a short period of time. They eventually picked up. Even Celsus, who was not a Christian friend, said that his followers were performing, he called it devil work, but he was like writing 180 AD, a little bit late, but he was writing a little bit late to provide evidence that even the followers could do things that they couldn't have done before.
Cool. You said there's a lot of evidence for this. There's a lot of evidence that Jesus was crucified and that his tomb was found empty and that his, all of this stuff. What specifically is that evidence? So you said there's historical evidence. I said, what is this historical evidence? And then you just said there is evidence again. What is it specifically?
Yeah. Writings from Celsus, writings from TACIS, Josephus. I know part of Josephus.
So different people around the same time. Different people around the same time writing similar things or telling similar stories. Is that the evidence?
Yeah. None of those guys were friends to Christians.
None of those guys were contemporaries of Jesus.
Yeah, it's very odd to find a contemporary writer in the New Testament or any time back then. And if you're a historian, you wouldn't really do much contemporary writing anyway.
Right. So my question would be, right. So go on really quickly. My question would be, would multiple people from a similar time period telling a similar story be evidence that story literally happened? Or would it be evidence, or would it be more like, especially if it's a supernatural story of a guy who died and then rose from the dead 3 days later, would it be more likely that it actually happened, or would it be more likely that it was just a popular story at the time that was gaining traction in the culture? Because it's clearly a very popular story that has permeated the culture and has had staying power in the human zeitgeist, like for thousands of years now. So what would I just, sometimes I use this example, Gohan, when people talk about archaeological evidence of things that have happened potentially in the Bible. It's like, okay, so if I tell you a story about my day and I say, I left my house this morning and I walked down the street and I got coffee and I walked back to my apartment, and right before I got into my apartment, a cat on a skateboard skated up to me and did a kickflip and said, "Hey, dude, stay cool," and then flew away with a jetpack that burst out of its back. But what I have for you with this story to substantiate the story is I've got CCTV footage of me leaving my apartment, of me walking down the street. I've got security footage at the coffee shop of me getting the coffee. I've got eyewitness testimonies of people who saw me walking down the street, who testify that I was there. I've got my neighbors saying they could see me walking back up. The only thing I don't have is anybody to substantiate the claim that the cat was on the skateboard and did all that stuff, but I got everything else. And so I like, even when there is thin archaeological evidence or thin evidence of, like somebody wrote about something similar to an event that is described in the Bible, none of that works as evidence for the supernatural claims. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if can I? So what you're asking me is if there were other claims that like described very similar to what happened in the Bible with the same kind of evidence, would I believe it? Is that kind of your question?
What I'm trying to get you to understand is that, like, somebody writing down something similar to a story that's described in the New Testament doesn't work as evidence for me that happened, that the event being described literally happened as it's described in that book.
In your situation, you said you didn't have anybody describing the fact that the cat jumped on the skateboard and said, "Hey man, stay cool."
Yeah.
Or did you have witnesses of that?
No, let's say I do have witnesses of it, but I don't have any CCTV footage of it. I've got witnesses. So let's got people who.
Listen, for those witnesses, I'm assuming there was a large group of them.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say there were 100 people that all saw it happen.
Let's say there's 2. Because there's more than one, I can assume that they're not hallucinating. So that checks off one thing in my book. And I would have to know, is it maybe somebody just mistaken? So I would need it to be a longer period of time. So like with Jesus, he had meals with disciples and stuff like that afterwards. So it's not like they could have mistaken him for an imposter. So let's say in your situation, there's no way they could have mistaken that it was the cat saying, "Hey man, stay cool." All right, I checked that off in my book. As long as they're not mistaken, there's more.
But the problem is, the problem is, Johan, we don't, as Matt already pointed out, we don't have any contemporary writing. We don't. So everything that you're pointing to are people who talked about this years and years later. Sometimes 100 years later. Sometimes, so even like let's say that would have to be the accurate example, is that 100 years after this day where I went to go get coffee and the cat did the kickflip, the story was told that somebody saw the cat do the kickflip, and then that story got permeated into the culture.
I would say that's not something I agreed with, that there's no contemporaries. I just said Josephus and Tacitus were not contemporaries. But I do believe there were contemporaries who wrote down these events.
And who are who are they?
It depends on what you all say are who wrote the author and what, who wrote the Gospels and when. But I believe Matthew was an author of Matthew, and he wrote it before Peter or Paul died in the 60s.
Do you have evidence to substantiate that?
Your view on the authorship of the book of Matthew does not even match that of the majority of Christian scholars. The names attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are a matter of church tradition. They are not supported by any evidence. We don't have original copies, even if they wrote them. I'm sorry, I don't know why you're talking over me. I'll shut up again now, since you clearly don't want to joust with me, and I'll leave this to Austin.
That's fair. Austin, did you want to continue?
I don't give a shit if you think it's fair or not, Gohan, you smug jack.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave the ball in your court, Austin. Whatever you want.
I just still haven't heard anything that even comes close to rising to the level of like you said you wanted to reverse engineer this. You explained your theology, then you said, I get my theology from the Bible. I believe in the Bible because of this historical evidence. I said, what's the historical evidence? And your historical evidence was some people writing about this very, very famous story, this incredibly famous, very well-known story. A few other people wrote about it, other than just the people who wrote about it in the most popular version, which is the New Testament and the Gospels. And that's your evidence that it literally happened. So, I mean, I most of the people I know who are alive today could tell me the plot of the movie Avengers Endgame, and that doesn't mean that really happened. It's a very popular story in the culture that I currently live in the world that I live in, but that doesn't serve as hard evidence of the literal reality of the events depicted in that film. Does that make sense?
It does. And I would say there still are a couple of differences, but going back to Matt's point, the traditions we can trace back as early, like mid 100s for traditions of which authors wrote what books. It goes back to Irenaeus, a couple other early church fathers who have it down on paper. Matthew was writing in Hebrew. I know it's Greek.
Here's the thing.
Worded book. He said
here's the actual thing, Gohan.
In Rome.
Here's the actual thing: is it doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't actually fucking matter. Like, I don't care who wrote it.
If an eyewitness wrote it, that wouldn't matter to me.
If what wrote it?
If an eyewitness wrote it, it wouldn't matter to me.
You have to prove they're an eyewitness. You have to prove they're an eyewitness. You don't
exactly.
Would you stop talking when I'm talking? I will fucking mute you, and you will not get to say another word. I don't know why it is that every time I talk, you decide it's time to interrupt, but that shit is never going to fucking work here. I guarantee you. So first of all, you'd have to prove they're an eyewitness, not just show that they claim to be or were viewed as an eyewitness by other people. And then you have to show not just that they were an eyewitness, but that we should consider their testimony reliable, because we are already well aware that eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. Can you do either of those things? Can you show that they were in fact eyewitnesses? And can you show that those eyewitness accounts are in fact reliable?
Without the testimony of them or others, no, I can't. But the testimony of them and others are eyewitnesses.
Thank you for that admission. You have a useless, untestable proposition.
I got you, Matt.
So that's it. That's it, Gohan. No, but that's it. That's what we're trying to lead you to, is that, like, you're explaining how you get to everything, but everything is based on a foundation of just, you've got to just sort of, like our previous caller, our first caller on the show, who just said faith. Just said that one word, faith. And in my opinion, when it comes to a call-in show where you're supposed to be demonstrating evidence for extraordinary claims, faith amounts to just because. I just choose to. I just, at the end of the day, I just choose to believe that these people were eyewitnesses and that their eyewitness testimony is reliable because it fits the mold of what I want the explanation for existence to be, But that's not going to cut it for us here on this show.
I understand. It was actually because of you guys, especially Matt, that I actually grew away from believing that the Gospels were written. Like, I was brought up believing they were written by who we said they were. And then because of you guys, I was like, wait, no, this is all wrong. They weren't written by who we said they were.
And then you changed your mind again?
The evidence that I've spoken about, yes. The evidence that I've spoken about, I didn't know
What is your
before.
evidence? What is your evidence that Matthew wrote Matthew?
Let me just say the biggest.
No. What is your evidence? No, Gohan. What is your evidence that Matthew wrote Matthew?
Probably Irenaeus talking about him doing it early 100s before Peter and Paul died in Rome.
How would Irenaeus know when he was not a contemporary of Matthew?
He was a contemporary of Polycarp, who was a contemporary of John.
Okay. But Irenaeus also said that it's okay to lie on behalf of the Gospels, right?
I don't care what he said. I have this.
Oh, you don't care what he said when it's inconvenient to your point, but you care what he said. Please stop interrupting me. It will never fucking work for you, Gohan. When Irenaeus says that Matthew wrote Matthew, you're willing to believe that. But when Irenaeus says that it's okay to lie on behalf of the Gospels, you don't care what he said anymore. That means you're a dishonest interlocutor who believes things based on faith, and faith in the sense that Austin is describing, just because it's convenient. You have zero expertise, you have zero evidence, and you disagree with the bulk of scholars, including Christian New Testament scholars, on the authorship. And you'd fail to understand still that even if we knew for certain that Matthew was written by Matthew, it wouldn't change whether or not the statements in there were accurate. We could have a gospel written by Jesus himself, and that would not mean that it was accurate. You still have all of your work left in front of you, and what you are doing is using side things, additional claims. You are stacking up anecdotal claims and trying to make a case out of it. That's not how reason works. That's not how evidence works. You have no way to demonstrate that Matthew wrote Matthew. But even if you could demonstrate that Matthew wrote Matthew, we don't have an original of the gospel to know what it said. We can only know that it's relatively accurate or presumably accurate. And the dating for the gospel of Matthew by the bulk of scholars is not during the time of Jesus. And why would Matthew have to borrow and copy things from Mark or some other source? So what you're doing is engaged in, hey, I really want this to be the case because it strengthens my beliefs. Well, that's not how any of this works.
That's why I said too, I don't actually care who wrote it. That's because, like, at the end of the day, like, we're in the weeds about something that, because like Matt said, like, if Jesus himself wrote it, it still doesn't substantiate any of the supernatural claims. A good example is, like, I was raised LDS. I was raised Mormon in Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up there, and I know who wrote the Book of Mormon. Ostensibly, right? It was Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery, and they wrote it together. And the way that they wrote it was by dictation. Oliver would look inside this hat with peep stones, and Joseph would look into the hat, with peep stones. He would look at the gold plates that no one else was allowed to see, and he would look at them with peep stones, and he would dictate what the translation of the Reformed Egyptian on the plates was to Oliver, and Oliver would write it down with a quill and ink. And so it was written by dictation through Joseph Smith by Oliver Cowdery, but they say it was written by a guy named Nephi, and that he was just translating it. I think it's a obvious, con and work of fiction, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like that's the thing where it's like, I know how that book was written. I know how it came to be in the possession of every household that it's in now. I know how it got into the drawer of every Marriott hotel in the world. I know how it got there. It got there through this process with Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't substantiate any of the claims, the extraordinary claims, the supernatural claims that the book is making. The book is saying that, ancient Jews from Mesopotamia built transoceanic vessels by themselves. Like, one family built these giant ships that would have taken an entire industry to build and sailed to America in the Bronze Age. And I don't believe it. There's no archaeological evidence for it. They make claims about the origins of the Native American population, the indigenous population in the Americas. They say that they were from the lineage of people from Jerusalem. That's not anthropologically correct. We just, to me, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who wrote the book. You still, like, as Matt said, you have all your work in front of you. You still have to establish evidence for the claims that the book is making. You could prove definitively that it was written by Jesus of Nazareth himself. It does not establish evidence of the supernatural claims made in the pages of that book. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I just get a quick response?
Sure.
So I only brought up gospel authorship because you guys were complaining that there were no contemporaries. But now that you're saying,
what I was asking for is evidence of. You said you had historical evidence, and what you brought up is just things that people had written. And I said, why does that work? And then we got into the conversation about authorship, and all we've done is spiraled into more and more and more reasons why that doesn't qualify as evidence. And that's where we started with, is just like saying somebody wrote something. Yeah.
Like now that I understand why you guys are saying, like, it doesn't matter if Bob wrote what it said Bob wrote. How do I trust what Bob is writing? Like, I understand that too.
Exactly.
And also, I did admittedly cut in early on Matt. I thought he was saying Irenaeus was saying it's okay to lie. I didn't let him finish the sentence about the Gospels. That would discredit his credibility, except for the fact that he. And again, we need more evidence for this. If you guys are willing to go through the evidence, we can. But he actually did become a martyr for what he believed.
Okay.
So when
I was wrong. It's Eusebius that advocated for lying on behalf of the Gospels, not Irenaeus. But
Okay.
that doesn't
No worries.
matter because you said that you would dismiss the claims that you found inconvenient while accepting the claims that you found convenient. So the objection to your rationality still stands.
I just corrected that.
No, you didn't correct
said
that. I just corrected that I misspoke. I talked about Irenaeus when I was actually speaking about Eusebius. Irenaeus didn't advocate lying. Never mind. I try with you, Gohan, but I can't even. I don't understand how somebody, even with the delay, cannot figure out that I'm in mid-sentence.
A for effort.
No, F for fuck off.
All right.
Hey, Gohan, so, I have a question for you. This is unrelated. You've written no pronouns here. We don't normally ask callers about their pronouns. We just sort of leave it alone. But do you get offended if people refer to you with improper nouns?
Go for it.
I mean, which ones would you prefer? You say no.
I don't.
Is it okay if I she, her? You're okay with that? You're okay with that? Just any? Sure. All right. Well, just wanted to check. Just wanted to. Cool. I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to check that was a true, intellectually honest thing that you're okay with any pronouns. Yeah.
Awesome. You won't offend me. Don't worry about it.
We don't give a shit if we offend you. The reason we ask about people's preferred pronouns is because if someone would be bothered and offended by it, we'd rather not do that. You instead are making a ridiculous point, posturing, because you're opposed to this newfangled, hey, what's your pronoun thing. It is patently obvious, and it shows yet another problem with your thought processes.
I mean, if you guys want to jump ship and stop talking about this, you can.
No, I just went there because
I'm so glad to get permission to move on with our show from Gohan.
Yeah. I don't think that the reason why I went to that, Gohan, is because I don't think we're getting anywhere with this conversation. I think that what we've established is that you don't have good evidence for, like, you wanted to reverse engineer. You said, can I go backwards? And we said, sure, whatever you think will help you make your case the best. You started by explaining your theology. Then you said, I get my theology from the Bible, and I know the Bible is true from historical evidence. And I said, what's the historical evidence? And it fell, and the train fell off the tracks there.
How are you even talking?
And that's the end of it, is like, you can't even get back. So, because what you wanted to do then is say, and I know that, and that's how I know the existence of God. But once the train falls off the tracks that I don't actually have any evidence to substantiate the Bible, that's it. Like, for every step past there is, you've just got to sort of mash the puzzle pieces together and say, look, I finished the puzzle, even though it doesn't look like the picture on the box.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I disagree with it, but I do understand what you're saying. I would say, just in short, I don't know the Bible is real. I think it is because of the evidence. If Irenaeus was, and now it's Eusebius, but if Irenaeus was saying, hey, you can lie about the Bible, that I did say that would take away some credit from him. And then when he dies and becomes a martyr for what he believes, that gives him more credit. But the fact that
you, not him.
Do you know how many people in the history of the world have died for their beliefs, for their religious beliefs? Do you know how many different beliefs you would have to say are credible? Joseph Smith, I just mentioned Joseph Smith, was, in his mind and in the church's mind, was killed for his religious beliefs. A lot of people believe that he was just killed by a mob of people who were tired of having him come into their towns and marry their 12-year-old daughters. But, but in the mind of his church, he was killed because he was sticking up for his religious beliefs.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I wanted to get into that with your cat skateboarding guy, but I'm not sure if we have time. I'll go into it. But if
we
not,
don't have
I
any
understand.
Time. This is 30 minutes of my time and my audience's time already completely wasted.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get there, Gohan. Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Don't care.
Appreciate you calling in. Right. Have a good rest of your day, and I hope that it's interesting. You mentioned that at some point you were convinced by this show that maybe the Gospels weren't authored by the names that are ascribed to them, and then you went back on that. And I would just encourage you to continue. You seem like on some level you're capable of of cogent critical thinking, but then on other levels, you just sort of pick and choose things that you're going to decide qualify as substantive evidence for extraordinary claims. And I would just say it doesn't sound like from this conversation like you actually have anything that is substantive in the way of evidence for those extraordinary claims, and you're just sort of picking and choosing which ones feel like good enough evidence to you to justify a worldview that you don't really want to let go of. And I would just encourage you to, yeah.
For those who don't know, Gohan is a frequent caller that never gets anywhere and does not seem to care about reasonable evidence. And so when it's inconvenient, he will dismiss things. And when it's convenient, he will accept them. And then he'll appeal to faith because he doesn't have any way to demonstrate this without the Bible being true, which is something he admitted. Well, if you don't have any way to demonstrate the Bible is true, and by the way, you don't even have to demonstrate the whole Bible is true. You just have to demonstrate the particular claim you're citing in the Bible, because the Bible could have 500 false things and 4 true things. And as long as you're citing the true things and you can show that they're true, then you get to reference that. But they're not true because the Bible says them. They are true because of the evidential support that shows they are, in fact, consistent with the facts of reality. So if you're just going to say, I believe it because of the Bible, you've already admitted that you have a horribly flawed epistemology. You should not believe anything because it's in the Bible, or because it's in the dictionary, or because it's in Matt's Gospel Guide to 100% Reliable Truth. None of those things are reasons to believe the claims. The claims have to be supported by argument and evidence, something that Gohan has none of, and buys into things that are not only, in some cases, not even close to the standard position, but demonstrably false. Now, we didn't get into that this time, but we have in the past. So yeah, I'm not enthused about having a follow-up call with someone who, I mean, like the Gospel of Matthew was written somewhere in the late 1st century, probably 50 to 75 years after Jesus had supposedly died. Who died 50 years ago? So who died in 1975? I'm going to look up somebody who died in
John
1975.
Lennon, maybe? John Lennon?
No, that was 80.
Oh, 80.
So 1975 had a bunch of deaths. Let's see if we can pick somebody quickly who's relatively famous. I'm not seeing a name I recognize right off the bat. Let's just assume that Merle Alcock is someone that everyone knew about. Merle Alcock was born in February 1884, lived till March 1975, was an American contralto who sang with the Metropolitan Opera in 236 performances from 1919 to 1929. That's somebody who was reasonably famous. We have information on them. We can't compare what we know about Merle to what we know about Jesus, because Merle is closer to us in time, and we had much better record keeping and much better literacy rates. We have birth certificates and all kinds of stuff like that. But if someone today were to write a story, the story of Merle's life, how reliable would it be? It's 2025. Merle died in 1975. There are people that are still alive that you could possibly talk to that may have known her, but now you're relying on their stories about Merle.
And let's say you're not allowed to use any like internet or anything. You can't like watch videos. You can't, if there are, that you have to do it all through talking to people. You have to go and find people and talk to them and collect stories.
Yeah. And somebody in chat pointed out Elvis died in 77. So, okay, let's say in 2 years, somebody writes a book about Elvis, and they did it without access to the internet and without access to public libraries, and just had to go around and interview people who knew about Elvis. What do you think the accuracy of the Elvis story is likely to be in that scenario? However accurate it is now, it would be less accurate if you go back further in time, because the further back in time you go, the less people had opportunity to be literate, to interact with others, to engage and travel the world and watch television programs. How many people are going to be remembering something they heard on TV over the last 50 years, rewriting their memory to be like, oh yes, I remember when I saw Elvis in 1971 at this show. All of us do stuff like that. I've had friends correct my failures in memory on multiple occasions.
I think a good comp is someone like Mother God. That documentary that came out, like Love Wins, the Cult of Mother God. And if you talk to like her followers who are alive, I mean, she just died 5 years ago, something like that. If you talk to her followers, they will tell you with an unflinching sincerity, I've seen Mother God perform miracles. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. And there are multiple eyewitness testimonies that will say, I've watched Mother God commune with angels and with, I've seen it happen. I've seen her, transmutation of her becoming people like, there were different people that she would talk to Robin Williams and she would become Robin Williams and things like that. And she would talk to, all these different, and so it's like, we watch this happening in real time today, that there are people who are followers of, fanatical cults who will say with an unflinching sincerity, I was there in the room. I saw it happen. I watched
in the room where it happened.
Yeah. And then extrapolate that out 50 years and give it a 50-year span of telephone of these stories being told down the line, and then take away the internet, take away public libraries, take away all of that. And, so it's like, human beings are still very much so caught up in this cycle, but we've got other callers on the line. And I think we should see if anybody else has maybe something more substantive to
we can
present.
try. Paul's calling from Colorado to give us the logical reason to believe in God. Pronouns are they, them. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
It's a mixed bag today. I'm definitely frustrated at people's inability to present, a reasonable case. But, I've also been doing this for a couple decades. So you say you have the logical reason to believe in God. Is it supported by empirical evidence at all?
No.
Is there any way to investigate it and make empirical evidence for it?
Well, I mean, you guys said philosophical arguments are just as reasonable to argue.
I'm sorry, that's not an answer to my question.
No, there's no empirical evidence for the supernatural.
And are you saying that there can't be, or it's the current state is that there can't be?
As far as I'm concerned, no. Yeah.
Okay. So what is your logical reason to believe in a God that I'm presuming you would agree we can't test?
I think the idea of consciousness and rationality.
Explain.
Okay, so you agree that we are conscious beings. We have rational faculties.
Yes.
Okay, so I personally believe that rationality can't come from blind matter or blind
I don't care.
Physical process.
See, here's the thing. We asked for evidence. You don't have that, and you admit that it's not there. Now you're going to make a logical case for it, but all you're doing is stating your opinion. You're saying, I personally believe that this. We have no reason to care what you personally believe. We have reason to believe, to care why you believe. So what is it that convinces you that consciousness cannot arise from material when the only evidence we have of consciousness is something that arises from material?
Well, if you look at evolution, I mean, there have been many predecessors to the human species that have come. I mean, let's talk about the worm C. elegans. We don't see C. elegans sitting around the coffee.
Paul, my question isn't referenced in any way by evolution or species that came before us. My question was, why are you convinced that consciousness requires something other than the material world?
Because there's no evidence of consciousness outside of, or rationality specifically outside of the human species.
No. So first of all, there is evidence of rationality outside of the human species, but that's also not an answer to my question. My question is, why do you think consciousness cannot arise from the material world?
Because we have no evidence for that happening anywhere. I mean, where's the evidence?
Show me any consciousness that exists absent a brain.
I'm not understanding your question.
Are
What he's
brains
saying
material?
is,
Are brains material? Okay,
Yes.
Paul's not serious. No,
what
you're
he's
not
saying,
serious,
Paul, what he's saying is that you're saying that there's no evidence of consciousness ever coming from the material world. What we're saying is the only evidence of consciousness coming from anywhere is from the material world. Now, people always call in with every once in a while on this show to see if we have a solution for hard solipsism, which we always concede we don't. But that's neither here nor there. We just can only deal with existence in so much as we experience it, as we are able to perceive it, and what it seems to be saying. But the only explanation for consciousness that we have at our disposal, and you even agree that there's no evidence for the supernatural. The only thing that seems evidentially true is that consciousness is born out of the material universe. That the materials that exist
here. So I never. Sorry to cut you off. I never said that there's no evidence of the supernatural. I said we can't empirically test for the supernatural.
So what is the evidence that we cannot test?
Well, one of the evidence I'm giving is our ability to ration, right? I mean, it doesn't serve evolution for us to have
done with
these
Paul, you're a
discussions.
fraud. Paul, you're a fraud. We don't ration, we reason. Ration is when you allot a certain amount of cheese to somebody and a certain amount of meat to somebody else. But also, when we're saying, what is the evidence? You said there can be no evidence of the supernatural, and you're inferring that the supernatural exists because you don't personally accept the current materialistic explanations for consciousness. But even if we had no explanation for consciousness, it is fallacious to infer that because we don't currently have a materialistic explanation for consciousness, therefore the explanation is supernatural. And it is a violation of sound reasoning to say that not only is it not a fallacious argument, but it is the very fact that we can reason that supports the notion that it's supernatural. You are engaged in a string of nonsensical, unconnected claims that make me feel like I'm talking to an AI chatbot that hasn't bothered to look into this subject at all. The reality is that we are conscious, and by the way, so are other animals, and we reason, and by the way, so do other animals. All of the available evidence we have for consciousness has consciousness existing seemingly as a product of a material brain, but we have no examples anywhere of consciousness outside of a brain. And at the end of the day, if we had no explanation, material or otherwise, for consciousness, you don't then get to say, oh, therefore we can go leaping to the supernatural and claim that it's justified. Meanwhile, in addition to all that, you called in to give the logical reason for believing in a God. Even if there was something supernatural, and that something supernatural is the cause for our consciousness, that doesn't in any way demonstrate that that supernatural thing is God. So you are trying to skip about 20 steps based on your own personal dismissal of the limits of materialism to currently explain things that you don't understand.
Okay, I mean, a couple points here again. I mean, would you argue that bacteria have a brain?
Paul, did I say that all animals have brains or all animals are conscious? No, you don't have to answer it. The answer is no. I don't know whether or not.
Okay, so are they conscious?
I'm sorry, I don't know why you're fucking speaking right now. I don't know, nor is it relevant whether or not bacteria are conscious. There are other animals that are conscious. All of the other great apes are conscious. My reptiles are conscious. My cat's conscious. All of those things are conscious. So the fact that you both got confused reason and ration and now go leaping towards bacteria in order to highlight something that is dubious at best, instead of actually dealing honestly with the question, means that I surrender. Austin, Paul is all yours.
I only brought up bacteria because you made the claim that all animals that are conscious
no, sir, I did not
brain.
make that. No, sir, I did not make that claim. If you were better at listening, you would have realized I did not make that claim. I'll rewind to double check.
And Paul, I think that it's actually neither here nor there. I don't think it actually matters because what Matt did say is, I don't know whether or not bacteria is conscious, and it doesn't really matter. What the point was, you made the claim that only humans experience consciousness, and that our ability to, in your words, ration, but I think what you meant was reason, is evidence of a God. But Matt was just trying to explain that we witness consciousness all over the place. I mean, when quantum physicists talk about the double slit experiment, there are people who theorize that it's evidence that even molecules and tiny experience consciousness and have some kind of ability to self-determination. But there's all different kinds of theories on where consciousness arises from, what it actually is. Could there be a consciousness to planets and to nature itself? We don't actually know the answers to these things, but none of these questions, you don't get to say, because we don't have a way to test all of this stuff empirically, therefore God. That's not a logical process. You called in saying you have a logical explanation that should lead us to believing in God, and being able to say we don't understand everything there is to understand about the phenomenon of consciousness is not it does not ipso facto result in a logical explanation for the existence of a literal God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so a couple things again. I never claimed that just because we're conscious that's the reason for God. I said it's our logical faculties and our rationality that point to it. And of course our consciousness too, because if I wasn't conscious, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you.
How do they point
to all of those
though?
together? Because blind, random physical processes of evolution don't lead us to having this. I mean, why not? Does it serve having this conversation if, in an evolutionary standpoint, like me and you talking about the existence of a supernatural creature?
I don't know,
and I
don't know, and I don't care, and it doesn't work as evidence. Like there's nothing logical about saying
you're an evolutionary biologist.
No, I'm not. That you're thinking of Forrest. I don't know, and I don't care why we're having this conversation. What I'm saying is, like, the fact that you and I are capable of having this conversation, I don't know how we come to be. I don't know why I'm not a dolphin. I don't know why you're not a praying mantis. I don't know why we're both. Okay.
I did not.
I don't know why
I did not hang up on him.
Yeah.
He ran away when he realized he had no fucking clue who he was talking to or what he was talking about. By the way, I did go back. I rewound and re-listened and wrote down what I said word for word. We are conscious, and by the way, so are other animals. At no point did I say, so are all other animals. Paul's a sloppy thinker and a sloppy listener and a sloppy viewer who seems to think you were Forrest. And also, I'm pretty sure we could call Forrest right now and ask him to address Paul's question, because Forrest, as an evolutionary biologist, also probably would not care at all about whether or not consciousness has arisen in other beings or any of that stuff with regard to, is it evidence of the supernatural?
Exactly. That's the thing, is it's like, cool, like human beings have the ability to reason and use logic and have philosophical conversations. Amazing. Why? there are any number of reasons why you could theorize why that would be evolutionarily advantageous for our species to be able to do that. And I think that you can make the argument that storytelling, I talk about this a lot on this show, that storytelling is a very kind of seemingly uniquely human feature in all of the species that we observe on Earth. And it's sort of the way that we've established the boundaries around which tribes we align with and find home with and find safety with and security with. And we have these shared cultural traditions of passed on stories and things like that. And it was a way for us to contextualize our existence and make sense of, and sort of pass on stories of like about what's dangerous for us and what's safer for us and things like that. There are all different kinds of arguments you can make, but I don't see how any of it results in a logical pathway to explaining God. As you said, Matt, you're skipping so many steps by just saying, because humans are smart, the only possible explanation is a supernatural being divined it to be that way.
This is God of the gaps. And if he'd have stuck with, if he'd have skipped past consciousness, because there is what's known in philosophical circles, the hard problem of consciousness. We don't have a full understanding or explanation for it at all. And so when we say that the current evidence suggests that consciousness is an emergent property from matter in particular states, a particular type of matter, we're saying, like with all scientific proposed explanations, this is what the evidence suggests. Science doesn't make proclamations of truth. It doesn't say, this is the way it is. It says, all of the available evidence is consistent with this particular model. And we're going to go with this particular model as a tentative, revisable position until a better one comes along. And you know what's never going to be a better one? Well, we don't know how this happened, so it must be God. That's literally what Paul was advocating for. It had nothing to do with consciousness or reason. Paul could have picked any subject that he didn't understand or didn't accept, or that humanity doesn't understand or doesn't accept, and just say, well, I know the answer is probably God. That's God of the gaps. That's an attempt to fill gaps in our knowledge and understanding with God as if it explains something when it absolutely doesn't. Because we explain things in terms of other things that we understand. You can't solve a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery. You're not going to solve, why the giraffe's laryngeal nerve runs from its brain down into its rib cage, down that full neck, around its heart, and then back. We say that's consistent with evolution following the path of least resistance and being efficient. But can we show exactly why it happened? No. We think we can. We have really good understandings of genetics and morphology, so much so that I breed reptiles. We just got new eggs last night. And I know some of the genes of the parents, both the mother and the father. And so I know what the odds are and can calculate the odds of a variety of different things coming out. But the fact that that nerve seems odd, it certainly seems odd and inconsistent with the proposition that it was designed by an intelligent being, and is more evidence that it was an evolutionary process unguided by intelligence that was looking for efficiency. But if you were to say, yeah, but we really don't know that, and I don't buy that, therefore I think God did it. Okay, well, how did you rule out that Satan did it to fuck with us, to give us a curiosity? Oh, because God wouldn't allow that. Really? Which God wouldn't, and maybe your religion doesn't have a Satan in it. Maybe. It's bizarre to me because there are presuppositional apologists that use God as a grounding for reason. People like, well, I'm going to dig into names. We talked about John Lennox today on stream, so that's why it's in my head. But Paul didn't do any of that. Paul just says, we're the only beings who are conscious. No, we're not. All of the other great apes are conscious. Every animal in my house is conscious. And every animal in my house, every one of the animals that I count among the animals in my house, all the lizards, all the rodents, and the other mammals, they reason, can solve problems. And we know that, at least amongst the other great apes, they have a sense of fairness, which means they grasp abstract concepts as well. Hey, you paid him with fruit and you gave me a nut. I want the fruit. And they'll throw a little fit because raisins are sweet. And they're mad that they didn't get what somebody else got. There are real big problems and mysteries to solve. You're not solving any of them by saying, oh, I don't accept that, therefore I think it points to the supernatural, while simultaneously acknowledging that there is not, and you think cannot be, evidence to confirm the supernatural. Oh, I didn't say there wasn't evidence for the supernatural. I said there wasn't material evidence for supernatural. Yes, you need to go learn about the nature of evidence, because if you're talking about something that manifests in the material world, it necessarily must be detectable with empirical evidence for it to manifest in the world. This is why the other day I asked the caller Wednesday night, the guy who completely busted my Zen, hey, does your God interact with reality in any detectable way? And his response is, well, it depends on what you mean by reality. And that's the point at which I gave up.
Then you're in that Jordan Peterson conversation where you're not talking about anything. You're just going to go back and forth for hours defining terms.
Well, there's a couple other callers queuing up, but we do have one more theist on the line right now that I'd like to get to. Dave is calling from India, and Dave says humans can't create life, only God can. Hey, Dave, how do you know that?
Hello, Matt. Hi. So,
Hi.
I did a bunch of research, and I came across the conclusion that even if I provide you with all the necessary ingredients, you will not be able to produce life. You can only transfer it from one place to the other, but you can't create life. You can only transfer it.
So you did your own research and you came to the conclusion that only God can create life.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Why should we care about your research? Is it published somewhere? Has it been reviewed by other experts? Is there a scientific consensus that only God can create life? Because I'm pretty sure science doesn't have a consensus on whether or not God exists. And the bulk of scientists in the upper echelon of scientists don't believe in an agent God. And yet they all believe that life exists. And so presumably they're fine with the concept that life can arise without a God. So you've set up a false dichotomy here by saying humans can't create life, only God can. And not only is that a false dichotomy, because it must be the case that either only God can create life or something other than God can be the creator of life or the thing credited with creating life. But you try to do it into just humans and gods. What if there are fairies that can create life?
So, Matt, are you aware of cloning? You must be aware of cloning, right?
I'm sorry. The
Human
question I
cloning?
asked Dave was, what if there are fairies that can create life?
Yeah, then that would be considered God. Yes, that would be a part of God.
So fairies are God?
Yes, they would be a part of God. If they can create life, then yes, they would be a part of God.
So are you defining God as just that which can create life? So if I create life, I'm God?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So, okay. So then it sounds like your definition of God, as for the working purposes of this conversation, is just anything that can create life is God.
Yes, that is correct.
Can you show that the universe does not create life?
The universe does create life, right? The universe, we have like 50 billion habitable planets.
So the universe is God.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
God penetrates to everyone.
I specifically at the start of the show said I didn't have any interest in people calling in to say the universe was God unless they could demonstrate it with evidence. Can you demonstrate it with evidence?
So my evidence is that we can't create life. That is my evidence. That even after all this technology,
okay.
we cannot
My
create.
inability to create life is not evidence that the universe can.
Because the universe came before us, right? We came after the universe.
That's not proof that the universe can create life either. What is the evidence that the universe can create life?
I would say the particle wave duality. That would be the foundation for it.
How is wow? I don't have the slightest clue how that is in any way evidence that the universe can create life.
Because we have only two states, right? We have either particles or we have waves, and both of them coexist in this universe, and that's where the life begins, and that's why the universe is the proof that it created life. No,
I genuinely do not understand in the slightest what you are saying, because nothing is a coherent thought, and none of it makes any sense to me at all. You're saying that because of something related to particle duality, that is evidence that the universe can create life. That doesn't make any sense to me.
if we want evidence, we will have to look at the microscopic scale, not at the macroscopic, because the macro comes after the micro. And if you look at the micro, everything in our existence from Earth is the Earth is vibrating, our body is vibrating, everything around us is vibrating. And then we have absolute truth. We have a cupboard.
Dave, I asked if you could provide evidence that the universe can create life. You said yes. And now you're saying that you're stating things that are not evidence for that or anything else. You're just making claims. Well, as clearly as you can, give me the strongest evidence you have that the universe can create life.
We have more than one planet. If the universe couldn't create life, they would only have one planet, which is this one. But we have 60 billion other planets, which are inhabitable.
Genuinely, that is the most stupid thing I've heard all day. The notion that we have a lot of planets, and we have a lot of planets, and if the universe can create life, we'd have life on the planet. Nothing about that makes any sense at all. And you're still getting to the universe is God. Is the universe a conscious thinking agent with a purpose?
Yes. Yes.
How do you demonstrate that that's true?
Because we have systems for everything. If there was no will, if there was no God's will, it would all just be randomness. But everything we have is a system. We have a solar system, we have a biological system, we have a physical system. So everything is a system. And that's why the universe can create life. Because it does it in ordered fashion. It doesn't do it randomly.
Yeah.
So you started out by saying
you have
that
any understanding of how to demonstrate something's true. I give up.
So you started out by saying that humans cannot create life, only God can create life, and anything that can create life is God. And that's where we started. And now we're into the territory of systems. But the reason why we got to the universe is God, because the universe can ostensibly create life, that life originates out of the universe. The universe is God. How do we know that the universe is God? Just because life comes out of the universe. And you said systems, the creation of systems. So now we have gone full circle from only God creates life to only God creates systems. But the problem with that is human beings create all kinds of systems. Human beings are very good at creating systems and systematized forms of technology and communication and storytelling and working and, you know, assembly lines and industry and things like that. So we went from only God can create life. We went all the way around. How do we know that? You know, how the universe creates life. The universe is God. And we know that the universe is God because the universe creates systems, which means only God ostensibly can create systems, right? But human beings can also, yeah.
No, I think that's great. But also, not only can human beings create systems, but human beings can look at a universe and define and describe systems within it that are merely physics and chemistry, the dictated interactions of particles and things like that. But we can describe them as systems, and that doesn't mean that they are a system that was created by some other intelligence. So when I asked, how can you show that the universe is a thinking agent with will? And your answer was because there are systems in the universe. Do you just mean that because physics, do you just view all of physics as a system?
Yes. Yes.
And so what is your evidence that physics needed to be created rather than just being the natural interaction between things that couldn't have been another way? I'll wait for you to type that into ChatGPT.
No, sir, I'm not doing that. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that now. No.
Well, you know, well, again, so Dave, it's sort of like, you know, again, like the creation of systems, right? And the creation of like physics. You said physics is a system. So when people are designing video games, they have systems in their coding that creates the physics of the world of the video game, whether there's going to be light gravity in a certain map, or whether there's going to be heavy gravity, or, you know, the way that the physical interaction between the character and the objects on the map and things like that. And humans are devising the system of how the physics are going to work. So it just goes into, like, I think the question being asked to you is the existence of systems like the laws of physics. How does this work as evidence that an agent designed it to be that way, and that agent is God, that agent is not, you know, we go into simulation theory and, like, could it be a super advanced species that is, you know, just that created a computer simulation that we're living inside of? Or could it be, you know, that we're all living inside of a larger organism, you know, that we're inside of the brain of, like, a super giant being that has no idea that we're even here, and it exists inside of a larger system of physics? And why is any of that God in your mind? And why should we, you know, it's like, how do you determine at the end of the day, like, it could be anything, and you're just jumping to it's God because we don't have the answer. So this is another God of the gaps kind of thing. We're still in a situation where it's like, because there are systems at play in the physical universe that we can observe, and we don't necessarily know how those systems came to be, the answer is God. And how are you demonstrating any of that? How are you getting there other than just putting God in the gap in our knowledge?
I would say when I interact with reality, which is our Earth, the system that has been made by God makes 100% sense logically, and it has already been verified by all the scientists. So we could live in a planet where our heights are just 2 feet, right? So that's a different physics for a different planet and a different system, right? This is our physics for our planet and our system. So physics also changes from one place to the next. It doesn't stay constant throughout. And if physics, which is the very fundamental of our existence, is changing from one place to the next, that means, yeah, there is a gap, and that gap is being drained over by God.
Wow, he just admitted to God of the gaps. Meanwhile, the question I asked, no, once again, he has not come anywhere near answering the question that I asked. I give up. Dave, thanks for calling.
Okay. Yeah.
We're going to move on. So
Thanks, Dave.
we've got one caller on hold who wants to explain why they believe in God. I made some comments in chat right now. Okay, we're just going to ban Christian Ice because no, if I tell you to call in or I just assume you agree and you just keep spouting shit in chat, you don't get to stay. So say goodbye. So here's the thing. I know I've done this for 20 years, more than that. And it's Sunday afternoon. We're trying to get some people to call in, but is this really the best that theism has to offer? I mean, by my count, we've got multiple God of the gaps thing. We've got some nonsense about, hey, there's no physical proof of God because blah, blah, blah. Somebody who doesn't know anything at all about the subjects. Then there's the problem of hard consciousness, or God as the foundation for rationality, reality. Then there's people in chat saying that no, this caller's wrong. The universe isn't God.
We've got somebody calling in saying that they have historical evidence for the Bible, and it's just things that people wrote down, just more stuff that people said.
I heard some stuff and I agreed with it. I did my own research and I found, yes.
Right.
I'm pretty sure you're not qualified to research this. Your Google foo is also a little weak because you're saying that the universe is a thinking agent with a will of its own and that the universe is God. And you're claiming that only God can create life. But as far as I can tell, the universe is purely material. And if that's the case, then we're making a claim about the material world. And you think that you can demonstrate or that you can reasonably conclude that the universe is a being that is aware that can create life. I don't know if the universe has to reach outside the material world to do this or if it's just all material. And you know what? Neither do you. Every time we ask people, how do you justify this? What's your reason for this? It's an absolute failure. So right now there are lines open. We're gonna
I really like I'm still tripping on the shape of only God can create life. The universe creates life, so the universe is God. We know that the universe is God because the universe has systems. Only God could create systems. How do you know that only God can create systems? Well, because there are systems, and then it just goes in this loop of we're never getting around to. And you're right. It's like you've been doing this for 2 decades. I've been a regular contributor to this show for less than a year, and I'm already just kind of going boy, it's just the same stuff every week.
It's wild.
And yeah,
for the theists who are out there, if the callers are doing a good job of representing your beliefs, then you are wise to not call in and add to that. But if you're sitting there at home right now going, oh man, these callers, I mean, they certainly don't believe for the reasons I believe. They certainly don't have good arguments or evidence like I do. These have got to be like prank calls or trolls. I have a relationship with the risen Christ, or I'm convinced that, Muhammad was the only or the final prophet of Allah. And I have this, or I believe that Vishnu and Shiva are real and not just story things. And I have good evidence for it. If you're sitting there doing that and not calling in, we'll never know. And we will just assume that this is the cream of the crop, that this is the best theism has to offer is, well, I did my own research. I read some history. There's stuff we don't understand. And I think God would be a better explanation for it. Well, cool. I'm sorry that you've abandoned reason and rationality. Oh, I'm sorry, ratio or ration. This is frustrating because I've had much better conversations even in the last 6 months than we're even close to getting. And I'm sitting here doing my absolute best to maintain Zen and to give people more space to say what they need to say. But you need to be on topic because normally there are a bunch of people on hold. And if you meander all over the place and can't get to the topic, I don't know how to tell the difference between you and someone who's intentionally trying to waste our time and tie up our lines so that real callers can't get through. But I can tell you right now, there are lines open. If you're a theist that genuinely has good reason for your beliefs, here's your opportunity. You're going straight to the head of the class. We have Johnny calling from the UK. Pronouns are him. Johnny's agnostic, which is strange, but wants to explain why he's inclined to believe in God. So, Johnny, welcome. You're on with Austin and Matt.
Hello, guys. I hope you can hear me well.
I hear you. Okay, it's a little quiet, but
yeah. I will try to speak louder then. Yeah. I mean, I've had this conversation with somebody recently. To me, it seems that morality is objective. And I don't know if this is necessarily an argument for the existence of a God, but it seems to me, at least, that it's pointing in that direction. So,
okay.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Do you mean that?
Can we start?
The things that you're seeing with regard to morality, you think point to a being saying that's morality?
Well, my point is, what I'm trying to say is that I feel like there is like a progression on the scale of morality in behavior. So I feel like
Yeah, but that's also interesting because you said morality is objective, and if something,
yes.
if and okay, so that's, but you also think there's been a progression on it culturally, that it's changed or evolved with culture. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily with culture, but I feel like, as I said earlier, I feel that there is a progression in morality. So there is a scale of better types of behavior, and I feel like these type of behaviors must stop somewhere. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that there is
Johnny,
yes.
So you understand that? Do you play chess?
No, I'm contemplating starting that though.
It's a great game. I play it every day. I play it during calls sometime. Chess is a game that we completely made up and we have revised and changed the rules of over the years. There's nothing about the universe that said, this is what chess needs to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we first start playing chess, we know the rules, but we don't necessarily know the best strategy. And as we continue to play, we learn better and better strategies, right?
Yep.
Does that mean there's an objective best strategy? And does that imply that there's an objective maker?
Yeah, I understand your analogy. It's a very good one. I would say that demonstrates there are better objective ways to play.
Yeah. But so the assessment of, is this way better than others? That can be objective, but that's all it is relative to the goal of not losing. What if you have a different goal?
Yeah, that's true. Though I would say, yeah.
So basically what it is I've used this as an analogy before. The goal of chess is something we just declare. You could play chess and have a different goal. You could play I'm going to sacrifice my queen and then still try to win. You could make up whatever goals you want. But the base goal for chess is avoid losing. That is similar to other games, and it's what we do to gamify things. But there's nothing in the universe that dictates that the objective goal of chess is to avoid losing. But once we agree, when you and I sit down, hey, our shared objective is to avoid losing, that we agree that that's going to be the foundation. and here are the rules. Now, all of a sudden, every one of our moves can be evaluated non-subjectively with whether it advances or diminishes that goal. We may not always know the right answer because we may not be able to see far enough. Chess is not a solved game the way checkers is. So are you saying that there is an objective moral rule set that we are discovering?
Sorry if I didn't make myself understood. I'm a little bit tired too. I'm trying to say that I would say there are better ways to behave. There are better behaviors than others, and this points to me to us. Let me think it through. And sorry, just bear with me 1 second. It seems to me that if there are indeed better behaviors than others, then this points to objective morality, because there are objective ways. Yeah,
I used to think the same
behave
thing.
better.
I used to think the same thing, and I used to say that if there are better ways, there must be a best way. But there's not, because morality is entirely situational. The facts around the situation are dynamic, and the universe is dynamic, which means where it may be immoral to, let's say, break a window and steal something under A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, maybe it's actually morally permissible under scenario Q. Maybe it's morally permissible under a number of different scenarios. For example, I'd say it's wrong to steal groceries, but I remember watching during hurricanes when the grocery stores were closed and people couldn't get there and the food was going to spoil. I remember people going in and taking that food in order to survive. And I think their action was the most moral action that they could take. They were in a situation where they needed to protect their lives and the other people's lives. And there's food sitting over there that's going to waste. They have no way to pay for it. They have no way to interact with anybody. It's going to rot. I think that was the most moral action. If you have a simplified view, then they're thieves and they were immoral. And I would say they are thieves, but not immoral.
What would what would be the correspondence for best type of behavior, as you said earlier?
It depends entirely on the goal.
Yeah, no, but just sorry. I want to finish the sentence, and you will see what I mean by that. Because you said earlier that you used to believe in better types of behavior, and then therefore there must have been a best one.
Yeah.
The Bible would call it. Yeah. No, I understand that. I completely understand.
Okay.
The Bible would call it holiness, right?
Why would I?
The
Why
best
do I
type
care
of
what
behavior.
the Bible says?
I mean, yeah. Obviously, you said you used to believe in the best behavior.
Is slavery morally permissible?
I don't know. I mean, no, definitely no.
Okay. And if and you would agree that the Bible advocates for slavery being morally permissible, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are some verses there,
Not just some verses. The Bible specifically goes through and has two different rules, one for the Jews and one for the Gentiles. And it tells them who to enslave, how to enslave them, that they can buy their slaves from the heathen that surround them, that their slaves become their property, although the King James Version calls it money, but that's what it means, is property, that they can beat the slaves as long as they don't die within a couple of days, that the slaves can be transferred ownership and passed on to your children. None of this is something that I would consider moral. There may be some circumstance where you could invent something that's moral, but as a general rule for the world we live in and have always lived in, I would say that is and always was immoral, and it should have been fairly easy to recognize. And yet the Bible gets it wrong. So I don't care what the Bible says about morality. I care about whether or not the morality is in any way good or useful. And so far, the Bible, which doesn't have equality for sexes, doesn't have equality for sexuality, doesn't have equality at all. The Jews are God's chosen people. I think equality is a foundational principle of a good moral system, and that excludes the Bible and Christianity and Judaism.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I could see justified, slavery, but only in only in situations where, like, the so-called slaves would be contextually dependent on somebody. So not like um, you know, being forced to do it, but like having to do it. I feel like there is a difference between being
That's
forced
not
and having
slavery.
to. Sorry?
That's not slavery. That's a job.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Like, I feel like there are people in this world that they have been unfortunate, or like they couldn't like deal with life by themselves, so they would need like help. And
Yes,
you know,
that's help.
yeah,
That's not slavery either. In all of your attempts to try to find an excuse for why the Bible is so monumentally wrong about slavery, now you're just saying, oh, there's some circumstance where it's not really slavery, but I'd be okay with it. Yeah, me too. I'm okay with helping people, and I'm okay with people
yeah.
working. That's not slavery.
Earlier I was trying to say how I would see the how I would see this slavery justified. Like, if you would change the meaning of it, I would see it justified. But
Well,
like, no, I can't
if you
see.
change if you
Yeah,
change the meaning of good, I'd be fine with that too. You can't just change the meaning of things in order to try to find a way where it becomes good. Hell, if one of my favorite jokes of all time from a comedian that I really liked is about the Rodney King jury trial. And one of the officers sitting there, and the joke is that he says, well, it's all in how you look at it. For example, if you play the tape backwards, you'll see that we helped him up and sent him on his way. Yes, if you completely change the definition of things, that changes it.
I definitely don't think slavery is good. I definitely don't think slavery should be permitted. That was not my point.
Yeah, right. But I think that the problem foundationally for me with this entire call, Johnny, if I can just jump in here really quick, is that you started off by saying the reason why you're inclined to believe in a God as an agnostic is that morality is objective. And I even clarified. I said, is that what you're actually saying? Did you mean subjective? And he said, no, I mean objective. And he said, because morality is objective and there is objectively a better way to behave and a worse way to behave, there must be a best way to behave. And that best morality points to, I guess we would say, a morally perfect figure, which must be God. That there must be like a logical endpoint to this objective morality spectrum. And I just fundamentally disagree with the assertion that morality is indeed objective. I just live in a world where exactly what you just said. You said, I don't believe slavery is good. Well, there are people throughout human history who have disagreed with that assertion and who have, to them, through their subjective lens, as warped as I might find it, have been able to justify, and there are people who exist today who justify slavery. There are people right now, half the country that I live in right now is celebrating the idea of taking away healthcare from millions of people, children and disabled people, because they've decided that their personal subjective framework for morality is just to beat their political opponents at all costs. As long as it pisses off their political opponents, it's moral in their minds. What morality means to different people just takes on a different shape because morality is fundamentally subjective. So you and I might be able to come to a mutual understanding of morality that we can agree on and say, this is a moral framework that we believe in and a moral spectrum, but there's no way to actually definitively lock down a moral spectrum that we could, I don't think, honestly call objective and say this should be objective for all people everywhere in any circumstance, this spectrum. You and I might be able to agree on it. Me and Matt might be able to agree on it. The people in our chat might agree with all of us, and we might be pretty similarly minded. But even in our chat, I was looking and some people were saying things about how they feel morality should be structured that I was like, I could poke holes in that too. And there's just going to be different subjective approaches to the question of morality. So if that's where it starts, is just that the idea is morality is objective, and an objective moral spectrum implies the existence of a best or perfect morality, and that perfect morality would likely be God. I disagree with the foundation of the entire premise that morality is objective to begin with. I don't believe that it is, and I don't believe that there's any way to substantiate that claim unless you feel you can.
No, I definitely can't, and I won't waste your time. It was just only this idea that Jesus' behavior seemed very, not as you would expect from somebody lacking, profoundness and some somebody that would just lie. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wouldn't see somebody with that kind of profoundness lying. But there are obviously so many statements that he said that obviously it's kind of hard to believe, like very hard to believe. Because for example, I'm not convinced under no circumstance. I totally disagree that there should be somebody who would deserve hell. I mean, as bad as you would be as a person, and maybe there are some exceptions, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I just
Well, like I said,
can't convince you of something.
Yeah, like I said, Johnny, I would agree with you, and I think that you and I probably actually have a very similar idea of a subjective moral spectrum that we could agree on. I would agree with you that I don't think it's moral to subject someone to eternal torture because they got some weird test wrong. But I don't know that this is the best use of our time on this show, this call. I think that the premise of and you already agreed that the premise of your inclination to believe in God is this idea of moral objective morality, which you now agree you cannot demonstrate. And we do have people in line that say they would like to make it their case for an existence of God. So, in my opinion, I think maybe we should move on.
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
How do you feel?
I will do my homework. I will do my homework. Because I know I didn't present my argument, in the best way I could have. And thank you for having me here, guys.
Yep.
Thanks, Johnny.
And I wish you a good night. Thank you.
Of course,
bye.
you too. Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you again when you've got more. But
yeah.
All right. So let's see. As a reminder, this is one of many shows here on this network. We also will have the Sunday show After Dark, which I believe tonight is Forrest and Durante. Is that right? Correct. The screenshot of the schedule, I couldn't, it's fuzzy and I couldn't read. I should just go to the schedule. Anyway, in addition, Monday on Skeptalk, you've got Erica and Aaron Adair. So we've got biology and physics all in one place for a talk about skepticism and everything else. So the people who wanted to talk to the biologists, call in and talk to Erica tomorrow night. On Tuesday, Choose Gum is Alyssa and Taylor. For those who aren't aware, that's like all the other shows here except for one. It's a 6 p.m. Show that focuses on purity, culture, and religion's impact on women and women's issues. Wednesday, I will be on The Hang Up at 6 p.m. Central with Brady Goodwin. And Thursday, the Transatlantic Collins Show will be Arden and Luxander, and that's at 2 p.m. Central. That show focuses on trans rights, trans issues. If you've been accused of being homophobic and don't know why, you can call in and get some clarity. If you've been accused of being a homophobe and you're fucking proud of it, you can call in and address that as well. If you have concerns about trans issues, here's an example. I was playing EverQuest over the weekend, and a new person that we'd never met before joined our guild and our group and was sitting there talking in chat while we're playing the game. I don't need to go into the specifics of the game. When all of a sudden this person out of the blue says, oh man, I just watched a trans beat the hell out of somebody in this fight thing. And my first reaction was, let it go. Just, you're in a game. You don't need to dig into this. You don't necessarily need to correct everybody all the time. And I think that was a good instinct, but I also think it's not enough. When he continued down this road, I sent him a message privately rather than calling me out publicly. And I said something along the lines of, hey, just so you know, saying a trans is going to generally be viewed as offensive. And you should just say like trans person or trans fighter if you're talking about fighter stuff or something like that. Just use it as an adjective and not as a noun. Like you wouldn't say, I just saw a black do this, or I just saw, you might do a lefty, I suppose, if you're talking about
blacks. We hear a lot blacks.
Yeah.
It's like people don't understand the difference between saying a black person and yeah.
And so they thanked me, and then they said, do we have them in the guild? And I was like, would it matter? Because now you're digging a little bit deeper. And they're like, nah, I'm a Christian. I love everybody. And I was like, well, I used to be a Christian, and now I'm an atheist that debates everybody that has your views. But that's fine, because I generally love people as well. And as long as we're going to treat people with respect and dignity, we're all good. And we went on to have a good evening and grouped again another time. And hopefully they at least learned something. If nothing else, they learned a valuable lesson that I need to watch what I say when I don't know who I'm talking to. But more than that, not just, oh, I don't want to out myself as potentially problematic or bigoted. I should also rethink how I talk about people even when they're not here. When he was like, oh, do we have them in the guild? I'm like, well, my wife is trans. I know people in the guild who have trans kids, but why would it matter? Why wouldn't we try to do the right thing and refer to people correctly from the get-go? It avoids giving the appearance of being bigoted when you're not. And it definitely avoids you outing yourself if in fact you are bigoted. But had a good conversation with the dude. I think there's a lot of different approaches to this stuff. That's what I chose to do this past weekend. But you can go on the Transatlantic Call-In Show on Thursday, talk to them and ask them if what I did was right, or if they have better suggestions, which, by the way, is the first thing that I did after it was all over, was to go down and talk to Arden to see, could I have done it differently? Could I have done it better? And I was nicer than Arden probably would have been, especially when the dude's second thing that he said was, I would never want to fight a trans because you'd never live down the embarrassment of getting your ass kicked. And I was like, okay, let's just replace everything in that sentence, which is, I would never want to debate Matt because I'm fucking clueless, and he would expose it. That's the real thing that's potentially scary there. All right, here we go. Omar is calling from California. Pronouns are he, him. Omar says, I want to make my case for the first cause argument. Okay, go ahead, Omar. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Basically, I'd say based on the first cause argument, I would say that monotheism is rational and atheism is irrational. So
let's assume that we agreed with you right from the get-go that there must be a first cause.
Sure.
What's the demonstration that first cause is a God at all, let alone a monotheistic God?
Well, so let's take a look at the universe around us. Basically, space-time begins, right? And my thing is like, okay, what caused that to happen? So within space-time, cause and effect is a fact, correct?
We accept the causality model that we currently understand. It doesn't mean that it's universal, that it's inviolate, or that there aren't other models of causality. As a matter of fact, within philosophy, there are a couple different proposed models of causality. But yes, within the universe, cause seems to precede effect and serve as a foundation for it. But my question was, if we agree with you that there is a first cause, what's the demonstration that this first cause is a God, a thinking agent?
Well, so there's a few things that we could say about this first cause, and that is that this first cause itself cannot be dependent upon the existence of time, which is to say it's timeless, which is to say it's eternal.
No, that's not what that means. So we're prevented from looking outside of space-time. And so we don't know if there's a meta-time or a metaspace. But if there's only this time, then how much time has God existed for when the universe, when reality didn't exist?
Well, God is eternal, so
that's not what I asked.
That doesn't make sense.
How much? That's not what I asked. See, you keep not answering the question that I'm asking. So let's assume that there is not yet a reality, and the first cause exists. We're not yet to it being a God. How long has that first cause existed?
But time does not apply to that first.
Correct. What do you call something that exists for 0 time?
What do you call it?
Non-existent.
Existence requires
no, but
time.
We know it exists.
No.
But we know it.
No. Existence requires time. If something exists for 0 time, it is identical logically to something that does not exist.
Well, we could say it exists in a timeless state.
No, we can't. That means that everything that does not exist at all is equivalent to the first cause that you're saying. Because let's say, just for example, that a pink unicorn that farts pixies and snorts cocaine off hookers on Jupiter does not exist. It would be ridiculous to say that that thing exists in a timeless state, wouldn't it?
So, well, I'm coming at it from all right, within space-time.
That was a question where I presented something, and I said
I don't really understand the question.
Okay.
The question is it's the same proposition, right, Omar? The same proposition. If you say that God exists outside of time in a timeless space, the same proposition is anything then that does not exist exists in that space too. You can make the exact same proposition. So the question is, does a pink unicorn that farts pixies and does lines of cocaine off of hookers on Jupiter that does not exist but exists in a timeless space, does it exist the same as your God? Yes or no?
No.
How do you know?
You said it's a pink unicorn. Well, because you gave it description, so you would have to demonstrate those things.
No, sir.
Oh, so you're
right.
This is the problem. This is the problem. No, just because I gave it characteristics does not mean I have to demonstrate that those characteristics are real. I specifically picked something that none of us believe exists, and none of us believe ever existed or ever will exist. It might, but so far none of us are convinced of that. And my point is, if we define it as not existing, it would be ridiculous to say that it exists in a non-temporal state. But that's exactly what you're doing for God, or the first cause.
Yeah, well, the first cause, yeah. Well, because space-time did begin, so something caused.
That's irrelevant, Omar. So here, let's say in circle A is all of space-time, and then everything outside of circle A are things that are not existent in space-time or not merely existent in space-time. And you want to say that outside of this circle of space-time, there exists a first cause, and it exists in a
Yeah, there exists something which brought space-time into existence.
Omar, I don't need you to interject something that I've been correcting for 20 years. I need you to listen, because you're the one that said you don't understand. I know the argument, and I know you're claiming it brought space-time into existence. We're not to that point yet. We're on, does
Okay.
existence require time? So in the circle of all things that exist within space-time, outside of that
Within
circle,
space-time.
oh my fucking God.
Go ahead.
Fuck you.
Great.
Within that circle is space-time. Outside of that circle is where you want to put God. And I'm saying we could also put that pink unicorn there. We could put a married bachelor there. We could put any number of things that do not exist. Right?
I can't make that claim about outside the circle.
Why?
The only thing.
Why can you
The
make the
only
claim
thing I
about
can
your God?
say-
No, you can't make any claim about outside the circle. And you are now trapped in exposing, shut up. You are now trapped in exposing that your first cause has no evidence for it, exists for zero time, and you have no way to declare that it is in fact a God with will or agency. And so your first cause argument, even if we were to concede that there must have been a first cause, which is what I did at the beginning, the issue is you have no way to demonstrate that that first cause is a thinking agent God that did things with any purpose or intent. But Austin wants to get in, and I should shut up now.
No, I was basically just going to say that. That's it, Omar. Is like you said, I can't say that any of those things exist, and that's just it. That's it. You're right.
Well,
you can't say that any of those things that exist in a timeless space. You can't, but for some reason you are willing to set all of that aside and make an exception for whatever version of God you believe in. And it's functionally no different from any of those other things. The married bachelor, the pink unicorn, whatever. Leprechauns, gremlins, whatever. But for some reason you're making an exception for your God. And you admit
so
it's
here's
something. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I can make claims about the things inside of Circle A, correct?
Sure. Yep.
And one of the claims I can make is that whatever brought Circle A into existence, it itself cannot be dependent upon the existence of Circle A. I can make that.
How do you know that anything?
I'm going to interrupt here because this is important. You called in to say you were making a first cause argument, and now you're making an argument from contingency. Those are two completely separate things. Would you like to address the first cause argument or just concede that and move on? Well, I don't know why the fuck you felt that it was necessary to interrupt me there. Would you like to concede the first cause argument and move on to the contingency argument, or would you like to stay with the first cause argument?
I'd like to just make the argument I'm making. I don't know maybe it's not called the first cause. Maybe I got that wrong. I don't know what the name of my argument is.
Okay. So if you don't know the difference, if you don't know the difference between a first cause argument and a contingency argument, why should we care what you think?
Because I'm still making the argument, regardless of what it's called.
You don't even understand the arguments.
I may not know the name of the argument, but I do know my argument.
Okay.
What is your argument?
What's your argument?
Have you not already stated it, or what is your argument?
Well, so my argument is that we take Circle A, as you explained, and my argument is that my argument is, okay, anything inside Circle A is subject to cause and effect. So whatever brought Circle A into existence, I can say that thing cannot be dependent upon the existence of Circle
we don't
A,
even, but the problem is, right, but the problem is we don't even know that there was a thing that brought Circle A into existence. The Big Bang is tracking back the origin point. So everything is in space is expanding. And all we're doing is mathematically calculating the rate at which it's expanding and reverse engineering that and going backwards too. There must be a point at which it begins to expand. But there's nothing in that says that something or someone had to have created the first expansion. For all we know, it's just going like this always. And it's just a never-ending cycle of doing this. It's expanding and contracting constantly, and there are multiple. There could be infinite numbers of universes that are doing this over and over again. There's nothing that says that the creation of Circle A had to have been done by a thinking agent,
or that there's any creation of Circle A at all,
or that there's any creation of Circle A at all.
Well, we know Circle A exists, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we know that.
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
we are convinced that Circle A exists for good reasons by our experience of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And well, one thing I want to mention is you said that maybe there was an infinite number of expansions and contractions, but I would say that's not possible.
Okay.
Why?
We don't care
If
we don't care if you think it's not possible. What you said was that
I'll explain to you why.
No, not according to me.
Okay.
You said anything inside Circle A is subject to causality. I agree that as far as we can tell, just stop fucking talking. I don't need you to say right, because then it feels like you're interrupting. Just wait till I'm done and I'll say I'm done. Is that clear?
Clear.
Okay. So you said anything inside Circle A is subject to causality. And as a general rule, I would agree. There may be exceptions to that. We don't know, because we don't know everything that's within Circle A, and we don't know everything about Circle A. Then you said that you can say that whatever brought Circle A into existence can't be contingent on Circle A. And I would agree with you that whatever brought Circle A into existence is not contingent on the facts of Circle A necessarily. However, you haven't demonstrated that anything brought Circle A into existence. And even when you do demonstrate that something brought Circle A into existence, you have no way of telling us what that is, because we have no way to investigate prior to the Planck time. I'm done.
Okay. Well, if we agree that Circle A does exist, well,
we
so
do.
then we do know that something brought Circle A into existence.
No.
Correct?
No, we do not.
No, we do not. No. We agree that it exists.
Okay.
We do not know, based on its existence, that something brought it into existence. We don't know that. We don't know that it hasn't just always been expanding and contracting. We don't know that.
See, we can only investigate up to within the tiniest fraction of a second from when the expansion began. Prior to that, we can't say what it was. The entirety of space-time may have existed forever in a state that is not testable until the expansion occurs. Now, what you can say is that there may have been some external cause of the expansion, or there may not have been, but you need to demonstrate which one of those is correct.
Okay. Well, I can say that I know that there has not been an infinite number of expansions or contractions.
You can say that, but you can say anything. You cannot demonstrate that there.
I can.
That in fact, no, you can't. Go get your fucking Nobel Prize if you can demonstrate that prior to the Planck time. Talk one more time before I say I'm done, motherfucker.
Okay.
You cannot demonstrate that you have any way to talk about what occurred prior to the Planck time to show the expansion. It is an inference, both from causality applying within the circle, trying to apply it outside of the circle, to claim that every argument of that type breaks down because causality may not apply prior to the Planck time in the way that we understand causality now. We have only one universe to look at. We have no way to explore it. This is why it is an actual problem within philosophy, within cosmology, within causality. And yet you, Omar from California, think that you can solve this. You can get your new Nobel Prize. If you can, I'm done.
Okay, well, I'll explain to you why I can say that I know infinite space-time could not precede us. The reason I can say that is...
That is not, well, no, Omar. That is not what I said at all. I did not say that infinite space-time could precede us. I said that space-time begins at the expansion and we cannot comment prior to the expansion. So there's no point in you giving an argument for why infinite space-time couldn't exist before it, when that is not our position.
Also, what's weird is your contention about God, the God that you believe in, is that your God exists in a timeless space. So you believe in like the theoretically infinite being that exists outside of space-time, but you're saying that you can demonstrate that there's no possible way that there could be some sort of infinite space-time outside of the origin point of the expansion. And I guess I am at least the slightest bit curious in hearing you actually try to say how you know what existed before the expansion.
Okay, so let me take one thing that you mentioned earlier. You said maybe an infinite number of expansions and contractions.
Oh my fucking God.
The reason I can say that that cannot be the case, well, hear me out on this and see if maybe it kind of applies to other things we spoke about.
Because you're a fucking time waster. I'm going to let you finish because Austin wants to hear this, but we're still waiting for you to answer honestly the questions and the objections that we have. You are now objecting to something that we are not advocating for at all. But go ahead. Waste some more of our audience's time.
So I'm not the one that brought up previous.
Get to your point, or I will drop you like a fucking bad habit, because you may not have been the one that brought that up. But you're the one that continues to refuse the fucking answer, the questions and problems we've been pointing out. Would you get to it?
All right. So I'll give you an analogy of, let's say I say that when the sun circles the earth infinity times, then the earth will explode.
Okay, stop
when
talking.
Will the earth explode?
Stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need an analogy because analogies are always flawed. And also, you've started with an incredibly flawed understanding right from the very beginning, because there is not, and infinity is not a quantity. So there cannot be shut up. Don't say exactly when I'm fucking correcting your misinformation. All right, is that clear?
It's kind of hard when you can interrupt me and then...
Yes, because it's my fucking show and you're being obstinate and rude interrupting me. I'm interrupting you for fuck. Okay.
The fact that we're having a conversation.
No, I'm correcting your misinformation. Infinity is not a quantity. And when you use it as a quantity, you are committing an error, which is what you were doing in the argument that you were making.
Omar, are you there?
I think
you might be in a...
So then an infinite space-time could not have always existed. You did say that in this conversation. So that
no, sir, I did not say that space-time always existed.
No, he said space-time could not have always existed, is what we said. But I...
Okay, so that...
But Omar, what was said is that when we begin to be able to test space-time and observe things is at the point of expansion. What we've been saying is there's no way to demonstrate what happened before that point. Your contention at the beginning of this call was because something had to have created everything inside of Circle A and everything inside of existence, that thing must exist outside of a causal reality in a timeless space. And all we're saying is there's just no way for you to demonstrate anything that exists outside of existence, and there's no way to demonstrate that it was created, that it necessitated a creator, that it necessitated a design, that it has an origin point at all. And you've said that you can demonstrate that you know that there cannot be some kind of infinite expansion and contraction outside of this. It's impossible for you to demonstrate that. And the reason why Matt said earlier, go get your Nobel Prize if you think you can demonstrate that, is because you can't. But do you, I mean, so far, I would like to, like, do you believe that you can demonstrate that you know what happened before the point of expansion in our physical universe?
Okay, so as far as you saying that I cannot make any claim about it, what happened before that, I agree with that 99.9%. However, I do think a couple things I can say about it are that it itself cannot be dependent upon the existence of Circle A,
Jesus
which is to say,
Christ.
it
I
itself
already fucking
is
acknowledged that.
okay. So what I can say about it is that it is eternal
No,
and
sir.
infinite.
You
These
cannot
things I
say
can
that
say
it
about.
is eternal, and you cannot say that it even is. All you can say is, if it is, then it is not contingent on space-time, which is by definition. We're asking you, how do you demonstrate that it is at all?
By the fact that A did come into existence. Circle
No,
A
sir.
does exist.
A did not
no.
necessarily come into existence. A is space-time. That is the result of an expansion, and we have no way to investigate whether or not everything about space-time was a simultaneous causality under a causal model that space-time is not contingent upon, or some other model, because we don't have the ability to go investigate it. It is a mystery, and you're claiming that you've solved the mystery, just like tons of other theists stupidly think they've solved this mystery by saying, hey, it must be something. No, you can't even show the event of creation occurred. The only thing you can do is infer the event of expansion. If you want to say that something had to cause the expansion, fine. I don't know how you can demonstrate causality absent space-time, but also, since you can't explore prior to the Planck time and you have no other universes to investigate it, I don't see how it's possible for you to even say there is a cause of space-time, or how you could conclude that that cause is a thinking agent that willed space-time, because that action of I want to do this and then I do this is necessarily contingent on time. There has to be time to act.
Okay, so we do agree that space-time began, correct? Do we agree on that?
No.
It has a
We
beginning
agree.
point? Okay.
The current cosmological model has the universe expanding, and space-time, as we understand it, originates with that, the space-time that we experience. Whether there's other space-time or a meta space-time, we don't know. We don't know if there is no space and no time out there, and then you get a concurrent causation. And we don't know if there's, like, for example, we are the Sims running on a 486 DX, with this clock speed. And then there's a meta reality that, somebody else inhabits that has a different space time. And therefore that they are causal there. We don't know. And you're claiming that you do know. And I'm wondering where your Nobel Prize is.
All right. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think you, I think that about does it, Omar.
Omar left. I did not
All
drop
right.
Omar. Omar left.
Omar did a thing a few times that is always interesting to me. Like, like at one point, I think you told him "fuck you," and he laughed, he chuckled, which I think is just sort of like maybe a nervous response. But I think sometimes people who call in think that they're doing something when they get any kind of emotional, it's like you're not achieving anything by doing that. You're not scoring points in the argument. You're not, I think sometimes when I debate with conservatives about politics or about, with theists about theology, when they can't demonstrate their case, they will sort of lean on this thing of like, well, if I can frustrate you, then I will call that a win. And it's like, what a weak, pathetic, like how embarrassing to have a worldview where the best you can hope for in an argument that you're voluntarily participating in is, well, if I can't demonstrate my position meaningfully or substantively, hopefully I can at least just make you raise your voice more than mine, or, you know, or flummox you more than I'm flummoxed. And it's like, I just need to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely not doing as well today. I'm maintaining my zen, as somebody pointed out in chat. You're right. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying. This is incredibly frustrating because I think what needs to happen is Omar needs to call in tomorrow and have a conversation with Aaron Adair, who's a physicist, who can explain better than I could the difference between the A theory of time and the B theory of time, where the A theory of time is kind of our subjective living in it understanding of causality, and a B theory of time is that all of time is essentially simultaneous from a meta perspective. And where those things, where our understandings of time break down, because when you get back prior to the expansion, if you say, hey, what came before the Big Bang? Well, from our perspective of time, there is no before the Big Bang. That's when time, our experience of time, began. That doesn't tell you, like when you first boot up The Sims and press start, that is essentially the origin of their universe, and they experience time, if they're experiencing, at a rate that is different from out of here. I can pause them, I can rewind, fast forward, whatever, maybe within limits. And so a movie, for example, this might be a bad analogy because most of them are, but a movie that you've seen all the way start to finish, you're no longer in the perspective of experiencing it temporally. You are in an experience of knowing it, and yet the events that occurred proceed within the realm of the sort of, A-type theory of time of the experiencer, and you're outside of it. Theists in particular would love to say that, God is the viewer that exists outside of our space-time and who brought our space-time into existence. The problem is, since we have no way to investigate prior to when the time switch was flipped to begin the expansion of space-time, and we have no ability to explore other potential space-times as anything other than the abstract, we're stuck. And yet that's uncomfortable for people. I apologize.
It's been a lot of God of the gaps today. It's just questions that we acknowledge don't have answers, and they immediately go to, well, it must be magic.
That is going to be the final call of today's show. But there are more shows coming up, including the Sunday show After Dark here in about 2.5 hours or so. I'm looking forward to catching that. I've enjoyed the day with Austin. I really wish there were slightly better calls. At least the last caller was not advocating for something incoherent. They were just claiming to solve a problem that there's no good reason to think anybody has access to solving, but I'm willing to give everybody a try. But when you don't know the difference between first cause arguments and contingency arguments, when you don't know that seemingly just because something isn't contingent on space-time, that doesn't mean that it is likely to be a cause of space-time, or even if you got to a point where you could show there was a first cause, you still have no reason to think that that cause is an agent. You could say, oh, that cause is timeless, but only timeless from the perspective of our A-type experience of time, that it is not limited to that, which you did in the definition of that being. That doesn't tell you anything at all about it. What it wants, what a girl wants.
Mm-hmm.
None of that.
Yeah. I also want to say before the end of this show that to our audience that I am still going to make good on my end of the bargain for our recovering from our RFR, recovering from religion fundraiser. My job just doesn't seem to want to let me do this. Every single time I go to step into it, I get another gig that needs me to have the mustache. So as far as, you're just going to have to take it on faith that I will at some point honor this agreement, and you're just going to have to believe. for me out there on this Sunday. I'm asking for your faith. I'm asking for your belief in my word and my honesty that at some point you will see me with a mustache that is dyed 2 colors. You will see me with a mustache that has been half shaved off, and then you will see me eventually clean shaven on this show.
See,
and
I don't have any faith, but I do have the capacity to trust with reasonable evidence.
Yeah,
that's very different from faith. And I trust that Arthur is Arthur. I trust that Austin is a man of his word, and if he's not, I trust that he will pay the price of soliciting donations fraudulently. But no, it's all good. That's our show for today. Don't forget about all the other shows on the line. Huge thank you to our call screener and Morgan for producing behind the scenes. Everybody who tuned in had a great time watching and participating today. If you're out there and you're a theist and you have better arguments that you actually understand and would like to have a conversation about, we're here. And there will be guys here at the Sunday show after dark tonight. That's our show for today. We love you, babe. That's it. Don't forget about linemerch.com, and you can go to patreon.com/calltheline to support us there on Patreon. You can like, subscribe, and become a channel member here on YouTube as well. Look around. You'll find me and Austin in other places at other times and other shows. We will miss you until you see us again.